Okay, everybody hear me all right? Okay, good. So basically today I wanted to go over a little bit about sort of the basics of 3D graphics, and we're going to specifically look at a program called Tinkercad, which if you don't really know anything about 3D graphics and making 3D graphics, Tinkercad is going to be very, very helpful for you. And then we'll talk a little bit about kind of more advanced ideas like texturing and animation and how those work together to make the games that you're used to seeing. We will not be actually doing any texturing or animating in this. This is more just kind of explaining the concepts and why, why you should learn more about them. I should also note that Tinkercad does not give you the ability to do texturing or animating, but it does allow you to do the modeling, and then you can import the models into another program. So just really, let's go down all the way down to the bare bones. So what exactly is a 3D object anyway? What are 3D graphics? So a 3D space has 3 dimensions to it: height, width, and depth. You probably learned that in school. And so 3D objects in digital objects are comprised of many coordinates in 3D space. So usually it's an X, Y, Z coordinate. Which one corresponds to height, width, and depth can sometimes vary on the game engine or the software you're using, but you're pretty much always going to see X, Y, and Z. So there's a sort of basic geometry that goes along with this. So each one of those X, Y, and Z coordinates is going to be what we call a vertice. So it's a vertex. It's going to be a point, one specific point, and then you're going to build up your geometry by connecting these different points together. So if you connect 2 vertices, then you get an edge. If you connect 3 or more edges, then you would get what's called a face. So the face would be like a surface of an object, and then polygons are essentially kind of like groups of faces, and the distinction between a face and a polygon can vary depending on what it is that you're doing, but basically vertices, edges, and faces are definitely the 3 most important concepts to understand with regards to 3D objects. And so once you've actually created a 3D object comprised of all these different faces, we would refer to that as a mesh. And the reason why it's called a mesh is because it looks like a wire mesh or something, a screen, a net, when you look at it in a wireframe like this. And so anytime you see a movie or anything like that that has a CGI character or anything, it's going to be, you could basically break it down to something like this, where you can look at it in this wireframe mode, and it's basically just a whole bunch of these squares or triangles together. So what exactly is low poly? So low poly is a particular aesthetic style that creates beautiful graphics that do not strive for photorealism. So with low poly, you're not trying to create, the next Call of Duty. You're trying to create something that looks maybe a bit more cartoony, but also can look really nice as well. So defining features of what low poly is: be simple textures, constrained color palette. So you see here in like the example image, there's not a whole bunch of different colors going on here. There's been just a very small palette of colors that has been chosen, and you may see different shades of the same color repeating, but you're not going to see like a whole wide variety of colors here. Those colors usually tend to be kind of vibrant, so they pop a little bit more than photorealistic colors. And you also use different types of shading and lighting that create a pleasing aesthetic. So if you look here, this is sort of a difference between, both of these are low poly examples, right? So on the right, you have here Grand Theft Auto 3, that should be, for Sony's PlayStation 2, which came out in the early 2000s. And, if you saw a game like this today, you'd probably say, well, this looks like a really bad game. This looks like a very cheaply made game, even though this was state of the art, just a couple decades ago. Meanwhile, on the left, you have something that's also low poly, that also isn't really, extremely fancy in terms of its its design, but it's much more aesthetically pleasing. And this looks like a modern game, even though its polygon count is probably similar to that of Grand Theft Auto 3 over here. And you can see the differences, right? So in the background, for example, in Grand Theft Auto 3, you can see they've applied a low resolution photo to the storefront to try to make it look like a real storefront. And that is not something you would see in a low poly aesthetic here. You'd basically have flat textures that are very simple, and give it maybe sort of like a paper quality, sometimes like a clay quality to it, but it looks really nice. I also think this is one of the reasons why like 16-bit games, 8-bit games still look really nice today, whereas, the 3D games that came out for the original PlayStation or PlayStation 2 don't look so nice now, because they did have, they were very much limited in terms of what they could do, and I think that they created a much nicer aesthetic by working within those limitations. So another thing I want to talk about a little bit is shaders. So once you've actually got your 3D model, you can apply what's called shaders to the model, which is essentially a program that determines how each pixel on the screen should be lit, or how it should be colored. And so you can use shaders to dramatically change what the model is going to look like. So here we have an example from Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and on the left is what the game looks like if you go out and buy it and play it. You will see something that looks like the image on the left. On the right, someone has taken the model and turned off the shaders and used a more standard shader, and you can see the difference is pretty drastic. So the one on the left is a very stylized kind of effect. It's what we would call maybe a toon shader. And so what's nice about this is that essentially what it's doing is it's telling the graphics processing unit, the GPU, to render most of the pixels, as one shade, rather than shading slightly differently as you sort of are moving back on the model. So like, the shadows are much more gradual on the one that doesn't have the toon shading on it. But you can set it so that the shading will be more flattened, and it creates this interesting toon effect that really gives the game its particular style. You could also add something too, which another shader, for example, which might give it a black outline. So if you wanted to have a character with a black outline around them like a cartoon, you could definitely do something like that too. And basically the shader is just saying, okay, well, if you find the edge of the model here, just add a black pixel on that spot there, and you can create some nice effects that way. And shaders don't just apply for 3D models either. So this is an example this is one of the assets available on the Unity store. So this is the same sprite, but with lots of different shaders applied to it. We're not going to get into actually how to make shaders today, just because they can be very complex. Normally, it's a lot of coding and math, but you are starting to see now more game engines and 3D modeling tools that will provide what's called a node-based shader developer. So basically they give you little things you can plug into each other and do it on a graphical screen to decide how you want your shader to look. But yeah, shading is, you could just go out and get a job shading. So it's a huge area, and definitely requires a lot of technical skill to really master. But every game you see is going to have some sort of shaders being applied to it. Oh, that slide should have been earlier. If you wanted to check out shaders and how they work and how they can change how an object looks, you can go over to ShaderToy, which has a whole bunch of shaders and also the code. So it'll show you the output, but then you can also see the code that goes into it. And even you can make little modifications to the code yourself and see how that changes what you get on the other side. Okay, so let's move over to Tinkercad. So Tinkercad is a browser-based tool owned by Autodesk that allows you to easily manipulate 3D objects. It is mostly used for preparing 3D models for 3D printing, which is one of the reasons why it doesn't have any kind of texturing ability or anything like that, because the 3D model doesn't require any texturing on it. But it is possible to use it for digital games applications as well. So if for some reason you think you're going to be making a board game and you have some like a specific piece that you want that is unique to your game, that isn't just a meeple or a peg or something like that, you can definitely use something like Tinkercad to create something that's more unique to your game. So the pros of using Tinkercad: it's incredibly simple to use. It's also free. It's browser-based, which is also very convenient. You can share what you're working on with other people. It exports to file formats that can easily be opened by other software. So you can create your model and then import it into Blender, or you can import it into a texturing tool. It is designed with 3D printing in mind. Again, like I said, so if you do think you're going to be using it for board game pieces, it will work just fine for that. The downside is that it offers less direct control than a professional 3D modeling software. So if you're using something like Blender, you're probably going to start with a cube and then just keep building out the cube and building out the cube until you've got a much more complex model. But this, you're really kind of taking basic shapes and sort of connecting them together, which sometimes doesn't give you necessarily the kind of control you'd like. But a good place to start for beginners. And as I said, it can apply texture, shaders, or animations. So some other useful tips for Tinkercad. Well, so we'll get into that actually. I'm going to switch over to the scene here. Are there any questions so far before I start delving into this?
There's a couple questions. Sorry. I see a couple questions in the chat. Mulan, do you want Paula to answer that a little bit later, or?
Yes, actually, I think it's probably going to be answered in this demo.
Okay, cool. So we'll sit on that question for a few moments, if that's okay.
Thank you.
So if you head over to tinkercad.com yourselves, you can create an account and then you can start getting started playing around yourselves. Yeah, so this is the Tinkercad workspace. This is similar to what you're going to see really in any type of 3D software that you're going to use. So there will be some sort of a plane here that will provide some measurement, give you see like how it's divided up into squares, so you can sort of get an idea of how big things are compared to other things. Also, you're going to see that there is going to be some sort of so all of these things have a camera, even though you don't ever actually see the camera. This is the perspective that you, as the viewer, are watching from. And so all of these are going to have some sort of way to change the camera angle. So in this case here, it's up in the upper left-hand corner. Blender also has something similar to this as well. Blender has a bunch of hotkeys for navigating between these. That's going to be useful for when you are trying to model things from different angles. You're definitely going to want to be switching around, and usually you can do it freeform. So Tinkercad, if you do right click, you can move freeform, but there are going to be times when you're really going to want that kind of precision of knowing that you are 100% looking from the back, 100% looking from the top, 100% looking from the bottom. You can also scroll. You can zoom in and out using the scroll wheel. If you're using a laptop that doesn't have a scroll wheel, I believe if you just do the scroll action, that should work as well. If you left click, that will allow you to select objects. So if you just left click on a single object, it'll just select that one. If you click and drag, it is going to select all the objects inside that drag. And once you've clicked an object, you can click and hold down and it will move that object around. Probably stuff that you've worked with in other types of programs. Yeah, so on the right-hand side, you're going to see a bunch of different objects that you can put into the scene. So we have here box and cylinder, sphere, This is called a roof, cone, round roof. You can also add in text as well. We'll do a little text demonstration later. This one's called a scribble. So the way a scribble works is it allows you to draw a more complex shape. So for example, I can do this and then draw something like that, and then click done, and it just creates a shape like that right away. So if you have an idea for like a 2D design, but you want it extruded, that's the term, by the way. If you take something 2D and then sort of make it into a 3D shape, it's called extruding. You can do something like that. You can also import a design. If you've already created a design in Illustrator or Inkscape or something like that, you can import it as an SVG file, and then you can extrude it that way. So if you wanted to create, so if you had like a logo, for example, and you wanted to make it into a 3D version of the logo, you could import it as an SVG and then extrude it in the program.
Mulan, do you want to jump in with your question? It sounded very similar.
Yes, so I was trying to import 2D SVG files, and I tried like exporting from Photoshop, exporting from Illustrator, and none of them worked, like uploading. So I'm wondering whether it's because of like the high fidelity of the photos or like the amount of colors and details in the 2D image that's causing it to be too large a file or something. But is there any tips on like the SVG exporting specs, or like how better to export SVG files?
And this was into Tinkercad you were trying to do?
Yes.
I don't know offhand what the sort of upper limits are. I've done it a few times myself with fairly complicated things. I didn't use multiple colors though. I used just one color. So maybe that is a factor as well. I can do a little research into what might be causing that issue. Yeah, so I don't have an answer right off the bat.
Well, no worries.
Okay, so yeah, you can go ahead and just add as many different objects as you want. Now, once you add an object, you'll notice over here that it brings up this panel with information about the object. So in this case, with the cylinder here, we can actually change the number of sides of the cylinder. So if you want see if you can get in close there. If we turn it way down, the cylinder has a lot less, it's not nearly as smooth. If we crank it way up, it becomes much more smooth. So that's what the sides do there. So you're increasing the polygon count in that case, which has pros and cons. So the pro is, obviously it looks a lot smoother. The con is that it is now going to be more resource intensive. It's going to demand more from your computer to render this correctly. You can also apply a bevel as well. If you wanted something a little more pill shaped, you could do that. And then if you wanted to add more, more segments to the pill shape, you can do that too, and it creates a much smoother effect like that. Now, this up here on the top, where it says whole, essentially what this is doing is, and this is one of the things I really like about Tinkercad, because doing something similar in Blender is kind of a pain in the neck. But the way you're going to be making more complex shapes in Tinkercad, for the most part, is by taking two simple shapes and combining them into a more complex shape. And there are two basic ways that you can do that. This is called like Boolean geometry. So there's two basic ways you can do that. You can either, so if we go here and let's just say, I'm going to make this like that. Okay. So there's two basic ways we can do that. We can either, we'll select both objects, so we can add them together, and now we create a new single object like this. This almost looks like we could probably turn this into an Among Us guy, actually, now that I think about it. It's kind of got a little bit of that shape to it. So we can combine things into a single object, or if we go over here to whole, so if I click on the sphere, for example, and I click on whole, it's now going to make it transparent. If I click on both objects now at the same time, so if you hold shift and click on each of the objects that you want. It will put them together into a single group. And now if we combine them together, it's actually going to cut out the whole from the non-whole object. And then we can always undo if we've done that. We can either hit Control-Z to undo it, but even if we do a whole bunch of, if we decide to do another 30 steps here, and then we say, oh, actually, I don't want those grouped together anymore, you can always go in and click on this here to ungroup two objects that you've grouped together. But also the way I did it here, just sort of chucking them together like this, does not necessarily offer the kind of precision that you maybe want. So that's why there are ways to also align things effectively as well. So let's just select both of these. And if you go up here to the Align tool, this will now bring up an alignment system so that you can tell it how you want it to align. So if I click here, it's going to align both to their topmost points. If I click here, it's going to align them to sort of the middle on the vertical. This one will align them to middle on that axis, and now they're basically completely perfectly centered with each other. You can also use this to mirror objects. This is not as good with a box, but let's see. Yeah, so if you want to create like a reflection of something along. Yeah, but this one's only gonna. Oh, and I also didn't go over. So whenever you click on an object, you can also just click on one of the edges, and then it will size it accordingly. You may need to rotate the camera in order to be able to resize it from the direction that you want. But yeah, you can just pull in the edges, and that will give you the ability to resize an object. If you've got an object the way you want it and you don't want to make any more modifications to it, you can just hit this lock here, and then you can't change that particular object anymore. That's very useful if you've got a whole bunch of things going on and you're seeing it once, and let's just say you're doing like a box select and you don't want it to select the thing you've already got the way you want it. It's a good idea to lock it in place so that way you're not making additional changes to that by accident. There's also a text tool in here. So with the text tool, once you create it, you can just select it, and then here it gives you a text box. There. So you can just change it to whatever text you want. They have some font options, but not a lot. So this is one of the situations where maybe you'd rather, if you have a really complex, interesting font, you may want to actually just import an SVG of your pre-designed logo or whatever it is, and then change it from there. So you can adjust the height, you can adjust the bevel, segments, again, if you want a more rounded look. All right, so I'm going to combine these two things here. Oops, that's opposite of what I wanted. It's not right there. Do we have any questions about what I've done so far? Another useful tool is you hit Shift D. That will duplicate whatever you happen to currently have selected. So if I do this and hit Shift D, nope, no, sorry, Control D. Yeah, that will duplicate whatever object you currently have selected. You can also import 3D models as well. So for example, let's see here. So this is nice if you have a model that you found online and maybe you want to incorporate it somehow into the scene, but you don't, it would be too hard to design it in Tinkercad yourself. You can use something like this. Also, another thing as well, if you want to resize something, but you want to maintain its current size ratio, you can hit Shift and then click on one of the edges, and it will just scale up everything as a whole for you. Also, if you want to rotate the object, whenever you click on it, you will see that there are these arrows that are very helpful for rotating. So this is actually a model. It didn't actually import it very cleanly, but this is a model that I made a few months ago. It's got all sorts of like weird artifacts because of how it was imported. So you may need to clean things up a little bit sometimes before you can import it correctly. But that's an example of how you can import stuff. And then you have some ability to then add new, add the geometries together. So it's maybe not the most impressive thing. But. So one of the things I like about this over Blender, for example, is that Blender doesn't really merge objects together in a way that is particularly intuitive. And so I like the way that Tinkercad will just sort of combine two objects and then also remove. So when you combine two objects together, if there's any geometry that's going on under, that's not being seen anymore, Blender will just keep that geometry there, which is less efficient than if it gets rid of it and treats the whole object as just one single thing. So I like that Tinkercad sort of just does all that heavy lifting for you. Yeah, and then once you've gotten the object as you want it, you can go to export, and then you can choose a different file to use. OBJ is certainly the most popular. If you are doing, if you're going to use something like Mozilla Hubs, for example, I think this GLTF files is the kind of thing that it reads. So yeah, just because it says for 3D print doesn't mean you have to use it for 3D printing. It's just these will be 3D objects as opposed to laser cutting, which will be an SVG. SVG be a 2D object. And then you can tell it to include just the current shape you've selected or everything in the design. You can also send it to somebody if you wanted to have somebody else look at it. They can open it up on their end, make changes to it. So yeah, it's a pretty basic tool, but it has a lot of cool stuff that you can do with it. And there's also a ton of different shapes that you can choose from. So like if we go into here, there's all different letters that you can choose from. There's different characters that they have pre-made already. They're pretty simple. Connectors. So a lot of this is for like 3D printing work. There's like some furniture that you can use. All right, so. All right, so just kind of wrap up some of the other So another important thing that you're going to want to be doing if you're going to be doing 3D games is texturing. So once you've actually got your model, if you just do it in Tinkercad, it's just going to have this just completely flat texture on it. It's not going to have any kind of detail. It's just going to be a single solid color. But in a game, most of the time you're going to want something that has some sort of detail to it. And so then you would create something called a UV map, which basically think of it like an actual real world map. You know, we live on a spherical Earth, and we want to be able to flatten that out into an image. And so, you know, that's basically what a map is. And so there are lots of different ways to project that as well. So for example, here are a whole bunch of different types of projections for the Earth, even though it is one spherical shape. And UV maps work in very much the same way. You can kind of decide how you want to unwrap the object, as the term is, to unwrap the object to be able to apply different kinds of textures onto it. Certainly in the early days of gaming, when you didn't have a lot of processing power, creating textures for characters where you really kind of like all the little objects on the character that maybe you didn't want to have to actually model as real things, you might just create a 2D texture that you painted onto the character, like a, you know, if they have like a pouch on their, or if they had a belt, you might just paint the belt onto the texture. You know, if it's a pouch on the belt, you might paint that onto the texture. Most of the facial features was just going to be painted on. You weren't going to actually model eyelashes or, you know, things like that, or eyebrows. So one of the big innovations that came along was eventually bringing in something called normal maps. So what normal maps do is they kind of fake more complex geometry. So you can take a fairly simple 3D object and you can apply a normal map to it, and it will actually look as though it is more complex than it really is. And this was kind of a big change that came with 3D graphics. It's one of the reasons why 3D graphics look more, you know, rounded now than they did in the past, was through the development of normal maps. So here you can see an example of a brick wall. So without a normal map, it's essentially just it's essentially just a plane. So just 4 vertices with a solid surface, and then there's been a texture of brick wall applied to it. But once you add the normal mapping to it, it makes it look like it's a much, you know, much more 3D object. It gives a little more pop to it. But it's actually not any more complex than the object on the left. So that's nice because it saves on processing power. Specular maps was also another big thing that came along too, which you can add to your models as well. So that's going to add like sort of the shininess to the object, which can create nice looking metals and things like that. Yeah, so as you sort of finish up creating something in Tinkercad and you decide you want to move it over to a game engine, you know, think about how you can effectively use these different types of texture maps. I'm going to include in this PowerPoint at the bottom a bunch of links to texturing tools that you can use. Blender is a great one. Blender is kind of a one-stop shop. So Blender is going to give you the ability to model, it's going to give you the ability to texture, it's going to give you the ability to animate, but there are other programs that will do each of those different steps. Some are free, some are not. Some you would use in conjunction with Blender because they have just a little more functionality in one way or another. And you also probably want your 3D object to actually do something in the space, right? And so the way animating typically works in a 3D game or in a 2D game for that matter, is that you're working with something called a timeline. And so in a timeline, you're changing the property of your object in some way. So it could be its position in space, it could be its rotation, it could be its size, and you're creating things called keyframes. So, you know, if I have a ball, for example, and I want to move the ball to the bottom of the screen, I would have a keyframe at the top, at the start, that would be up towards the top, and then I would create another keyframe down towards the bottom, and then maybe another keyframe towards the middle. And what the software is going to do is it's going to smooth out that transition so that it looks like it's moving very nicely from one to the other, when really the only information I've given it is those 3 specific points somewhere along the timeline. And then in a game, you're often going to be triggering those animations to play at specific times. So if I start if I have a character and I start walking, for example, I will then trigger it to play the walking animation, and it will run through the, 5 seconds of, probably not 5 seconds, more like maybe 1 second of walking animation, right? And then if I keep walking, it will then loop that animation over and over again. And so you get an image of a character just walking, 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 walking until eventually you stop, and then you tell it to stop the character animation. And so in 3D modeling, and also in 2D modeling too with some programs, you're going to be doing what's called rigging. So what you're doing is you're essentially giving a skeleton to your 3D model, and you're saying to the program, when I move this part of the model, move this geometry along with it. And so there are some very neat tools out there that will actually do a lot of this for you. I was messing with one of them the other day called Mixamo, which is it's owned by Adobe now, but it's free. And so you can just import a humanoid 3D model, and it will actually just add the bone structure for you. And then you can kind of tweak it. And I would recommend using something that is very humanoid. I tried using something that was, I tried using the bear model that I had before, and it worked for the most part. You also probably want to have it without any clothes on also. You add the clothes later because it does get a little bit confused with that, but it's a really handy tool, and I definitely recommend checking that out. So yeah, Mixamo here. So, and it'll also come with a bunch of different animations that you can try. So once you've created your character, uploaded it to Mixamo, you can then apply any of the animations, and it will do those animations, and you can see how it looks. And so then this brings us over to Blender. So Blender's free, always will be free, super useful. It's also extensible, so there's a bunch of different plugins out there for Blender that can make it even better. But it lets you model the 3D objects, it lets you create the textures. You can also export to, if you want to do the textures in Photoshop. It allows you to create your own shaders, which you can then export as well and use it into a game engine. You can apply the rigs to your models there. You can animate the models. You can export the models, the animations, the rigs, the textures, all of that together, and then put it into something like Unity, Unreal Engine, stuff like that. So if you really want to get into 3D animation, 3D modeling, I would recommend moving over to Blender. Start out with Tinkercad, by all means, play around with it, but Blender is probably the direction you want to move in, or a similar type of professional software. But if you just want to create something really simple, Tinkercad is definitely the way to go.
Awesome. So I have a couple questions that I think maybe would be helpful for folks.
Sure.
First question, maybe we can kind of crowdsource this question. Where are some recommended places to download 3D models, especially ones that you can legally use, without royalty fees and whatnot, like copyright and so on? If we can curate that list, that'd be great. And then second question that I'm hoping we can touch upon is, this was a great overview and intro to Tinkercad. And once a person creates OBJ files, what are some of the creative ways we can use that? And, in terms of the workflow and taking that 3D model, how can we use that in various game engines, VR, experiences? What are the ways in terms of like efficient workflow? What are the best ways to, or what are some possible ways we could use 3D models in our own creations? So when we started the first one, like what are the best places to get 3D models that we can then import into Tinkercad or Blender or whatever? And then we'll move on to the other question.
So you're asking me, or are you just throwing it out to?
Yeah, I mean, anybody, but so, for maybe Paulo, you can tell us your favorite spots for downloading 3D models that you then, continue to combine with your own creations, or, as a starting point for you to edit.
Yeah, so like CG Trader is one, Free 3D is another one, Turbo Squid is a very popular one. There's a whole bunch of them out there. I can definitely I'm going to include a bunch of those in the PowerPoint. I haven't actually made those changes, but I'll do that before the end of the day. So if you wanted to go back later and look at the PowerPoint, it'll have more links to cool stuff like that. Yeah, there's tons of places. If you literally just Google free 3D models, you can find a ton of stuff. It'll also tell you what rights you have in terms of using it. So there are a lot of people who just want you to credit them somewhere, and you can just use the model for free without issue. There is some restriction if you wanted to make it into a commercial product and actually sell it. There might be more constraints that way, but if you're just doing a student project, you have a lot of choices.
Yeah, like Google Poly is another really good one with tons of 3D models. I guess like Thingiverse, what's it called? Yeah, there's a bunch of websites.
Yeah. Yeah, Thingiverse is pretty much mostly used for 3D printing, so there's not going to be really textures or anything like that on a Thingiverse model. So just bear that in mind, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I had a question along those same lines. If I could just jump in really quickly.
Sure.
So I have been importing models through the asset store in Unity, but what I'm wondering is, do you know if it's possible to take those models out and then import them into Blender, or do they just have to live in Unity?
I haven't really tried doing that myself. I know, like, I think it depends. In some cases, they sort of provide you with like the base files, but in other cases they want to keep it a little more proprietary. So I don't really know. I think it might be a sort of a case-by-case basis. But if you go into if you download something and go into the assets, you can kind of see if it's just like an OBJ file, then you should be able to just grab it and import it into Blender. Or an FBX file also would be something you can import into Blender.
Okay.
So going back to that second question, if everybody remembers, like last few weeks, we've been covering a few other tools. Like last week we did augmented reality. If you remember the eighth wall environment, now everybody has the capability to create your own 3D model of something. And then, for example, if you wanted to make an augmented reality bear pop up or even show up on your face, or, like trigger image to launch something else, I want us to talk a brief moment about how our 3D models and the creations that we can have, how we can use them in different game engines, and how we can use them for our own AR and VR creations, or, how we can make use of that. So what are some possibilities and ideas, and how would we do that? So, yeah.
So one thing I was thinking about before is that, it's not so relevant for AR, but one thing you can also do if you want to make a 2D game, I watched a tutorial, or not a tutorial, I watched a video the other day of someone who was using Blender not to create a 3D game or piece of artwork, but she wanted to create a 2D scene, but it was going to have a lot of perspective and straight lines, and she wasn't really confident enough to do that. So she actually just modeled the scene, rendered it as a 2D image, and then she drew and she painted over that 2D image. And so that's what we call like photo bashing or kit bashing. So you can create a 2D scene in Blender that you can then use in other stuff if you wanted to create a 2D game. You can also use that for concept art. So if you wanted to just say, here's my idea for a game, and just have something that would look nice and presentable that way.
Yeah, I certainly can see a lot of really fast possibilities with taking custom 3D models and bringing it into an environment like CoSpaces, where you can very easily make interactive VR and AR kinds of experiences. Like Adobe Aero we haven't talked about, but it's another really easy to use drag and drop augmented reality creation tool. Apple's Reality Composer, one could very easily make some pretty cool augmented reality experiences and whatnot. Think about like game engines like BuildBox, where you could bring in your own 3D models and have 3D games, or like 2.5D like isometric games, I guess, could be created very easily as well. And certainly Unity, Unreal, clearly would be good choices for, custom 3D models and working that in. I wonder if like Wick Editor or some of these other tools would be really good for 3D animation possibilities, or I'm not sure if that might be only a 2D environment.
Yeah, I think it's only 2D. Yeah.
Okay, maybe just 2D for that one. But the more we can connect the dots between some of these workshops, I think it'd be really cool to think about what can be created. And so the more we can brainstorm that, that'd be great. So I was wondering, do we want to, for like 25, 30 minutes, jump into Blender a little bit and to stay on the topic of 3D modeling, or what do we feel like we want to do? How does everybody feel? People have some ideas of some custom 3D models that people would want to create?
I'd be up for seeing how that works.
Okay.
I think the questions I have, I'm in that process now where I'm trying to understand how to import animations, and like I'm using Unity, and it's when you're using some of the engines aren't as easy to understand, like what you would need to do outside of Unity to import into it. So I think my questions are somewhat different, but I'd be more than happy to like play around and check out Blender for sure.
Okay. Yeah, Merge Cube that Mulan just wrote in the chat, super easy to create a custom 3D model and drag and drop it directly into CoSpaces for a Merge Cube experience. And then Merge Cube also has a separate API and development environment, where one could create stuff, without using CoSpaces as well. Why don't we jump into Blender then? Thank you, Paula. That was an awesome overview of basic 3D concepts. Lingy, do you want to jump in with some?
Yeah, you want me to I can show some basic with Blender. So I'm gonna join with my other computer.
Okay, cool. While he's bringing that in, are folks pretty new to 3D modeling in general, or have people done a little bit before? Everybody's muted with their camera off, so I can't tell.
Okay.
Oh, new. Okay, people saying cool.
I think I should start with where to download it. So Google Blender and go to the website. You can download it for free. The newest version is 2.9. You just download it and install it. It's very quick, I guess. You guys can do it now and follow along. Yeah, okay. So this is the interface when we enter Blender. In the middle, we can start new file. For beginner, we should use general. The Blender can also be used for like 2D animation, sculpting, and visual effects, also video editing. That's a plus. So start with the general. We already have a cube that's been made. Like that's a default cube. Normally we delete it, but we can use it for demonstrating how this works. So people are following, right? This is default cube. Press the scroll wheel on your mouse and drag it. You can change your perspective, change your view. So you are kind of rotating around this cube. And scroll up, allow you to zoom in, and scroll down, allow you to zoom out. And here is a hand button right here. You click it and drag it. You can move not around, but in your plane, move just left, right, up and down. If you lost your cube, you simply go view and frame selected. You need to click your cube. View selected, you'll go back to your cube. So this part, anyone has any confusion right now? Everybody good? Okay. Then we will go to edit mode. So a good thing is you can edit each vertex on this cube. So for example, on Tinkercad, you can only resize it to make it larger, smaller, or make it longer or shorter. But in Blender, you can move each vertex. So press tab on your keyboard. You kind of go to edit mode. This is showing where your edit mode is. Let me make words larger so you guys can see it better. And preference, I can make everything bigger so you can see better. So right here, there's edit mode. If I press tab again, it's object mode. So now it's edit mode. I can choose a vertex I want to move and press G to move it anywhere. So right now we have a weird shape cube like this. So basically press G to move the vertex. And yeah, then here you can select vertex or edge. You can also move the entire edge, or you can move the entire face like this. Press G for move and also press S for scale. You can scale this face up and bigger, smaller, bigger, smaller. So that's how you manipulate it. So now we have a very weird shape, and but you got the idea how to do the basics right now. When you go out of edit mode, now we are in object mode. You can also press G to move the stuff, and press G and press Z allow you to move up and down on the Z axis, X for X axis, and Y for Y axis. Press S for scale up and scale down, and press R to rotate it. You can also rotate around the Z axis, so press Z again. You can rotate around Z axis or X axis. I'm pressing Y now, so Y axis. That's basically how it works. Anyone want me to make anything? Like you have any idea what you want to make? What you want me to make? I can show you how it's being done. You want me to make a object or a person? Anyone has any idea? A beer? You mean a beer? Okay. Okay, to make a beer, I need to find a reference. Okay, let's review. Okay, let me find a side view of a beer so I can make it. Right here. Okay, need to save it. I will save it to desktop. So now we have a reference. We delete this cube. Now I import this beer. Not like this. So I can add a mesh, or there are some basic mesh for you. But before that, I need to import this image that I just downloaded. Did I just download it to desktop? Yeah, right here. Okay. Now I have a beer reference. I can make a beer based on this. So start with a cube, and I will make it a little far away. Yeah, like right here. So frame selected. I can start to make my beer. So I move it right here and go to edit mode. I want to see cross it. Okay. So first thing I need to do is move it here so it looks like a beer. I need to extrude it, scale it. So now we have a very rough shape of the beer with his butt. And we need to make a, so press E to extrude it. So now we have another surface. That's by pressing E. And scale it down to make it at where the neck is. Then extrude again. And move it here. Extrude it, scale, make it smaller, rotate it, scale it. So now we have a body of the beer. We can rotate around it to see it's a very low poly beer. We will make adjustment later. Now we need to give it a loop cut. So press Ctrl and R. I will make a loop cut in the middle. So this beer is divided into left and right. I guess I will make more cuts. So 3 cuts. Okay. So basically the legs extrude from here, right? So we have his left leg, then it should extrude again. Yeah, that's how we make a beer, how it can, a low poly beer can be made. We just need to make the 3 other legs. There will be a low poly beer. Anyone has any question you want to ask me when I do it? If not, I will just keep going. So I use a knife tool. Not a knife tool. I guess I will just extend it. I'll make the rear leg first. So I select the surface I want to extrude. I just did that. I extrude it. I scale it down, rotate it, and move to the right place. This is for the knee, and then we go to the knee to the feet. Then also the feet, I need to extrude again, make it smaller. There we go, a beer. So if you don't really care about detail, this kind of beer can already be imported to game engine. So now I mirror it. So delete unnecessary stuff. Add a modification, mirror it. So now I have an entire beer that's been made just in a few minutes. If you give me like another hour, I can make it look more like a real beer. Yeah.
That's impressive. Speed art.
Yeah, that's pretty for prototyping because you don't want to spend hours to make a beer and find out it doesn't work. So spend just minutes to do a rough beer like this is very good for prototyping. Yeah, anyone want to see me making other things, or what do you think I should do right now?
Do you want to add some color or texture or something to that, just to show something a little additional?
Okay.
Compared to what we're doing in Tinkercad?
Yeah, okay. So the color doesn't match the beer, right? I need to add a color. So how to make color is basically make a material. So this is a material tab, this is the sphere. So it shows material property. I add a new property here, new material here, and basically I can change the color to match it. maybe if I want to make a eye on it, I don't do it on the beer. I can add a small sphere. Well, it's not very small, but I can scale it down to put it where the eye is. It's too large. Okay, so it's a weird eye, I guess. I duplicate, put it on the other side. Now it has eyes, but it's weird. I need to move it up a little bit because so I didn't have much planning for this, so it kind of looks weird. Maybe an ear from here. So that's a cut tool. I cut it, so there's one more edge here, or 2 more vertices. I can extrude it to make it like an ear. Now it looks more like a ear. Yeah. Sorry for it. Yeah, that's how we play.
I wonder, I don't know how much time you have, but I'm just wondering, like, if you were to add bones to it and like try to rig it, like what does that look like in here?
Okay.
Could you do it from this rough prototype, or do you have to be in a different state for start adding the model to it?
No, I can do it, but it's a long time ago. Let me say I can do it now. So basically I need to add an armature. So this is a bone. So armature is a basic. It's another word for rigging, I guess. It's in Blender. So we have a base bone right here. This is the first bone. Normally first bone is start from the butt, I guess. Why it doesn't show? Okay, now it's better. So I can size it. So this bone comes from butt to somewhere in there. Yeah, this looks better. So depends on how many bones you want. So I can just have one bone in the body, or for more complicated, you can add more bone, just like your spine. So like this, you can have way more bone, so it can bend in more places. But if you only have one bone, the body doesn't bend. And extrude it. So now we have a thigh, and under the knee, and then the feet. Right here, you can do this. I just press E to extrude it. So now I have more bones. And for more complicated skeleton, you can add also fingers. So 4 here as a finger, then add 1 for head. So now I guess we have a basic bone, but I need to move them to the left. Then let me see if I can make a move, because I forgot how to assign vertices to the bone. In this hierarchy, you can see there's a structure coming from the middle, the main bone, and there's a bone outside. I guess I cannot do it now. I forgot. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. You get it.
Mm-hmm. So one more step is just you need to assign the vertex group. So for example, this bone is for the foot. So I should assign all the vertex on foot to this bone. So when this bone moves, when when this ball moves like this, those vertex on the foot should follow it, just like in animation. Yeah.
So I think there's a timeline on the bottom there, so Blender allows you to also create some, basic animations.
Mm-hmm. Put in the environment, like a landscape with some scenario. Okay. Let me see what I can do. Yeah. Need to import. Let me see if I have a good environment on my computer. Probably not. Okay, I think I have something. Probably a beach. So where is the beer cube? No, it's better to rename it to beer so you can find it on your hierarchy. When you're making a lot of things, you will kind of get lost of where the stuff is. For example, here there are a lot of trees, rocks, so naming is important. So right here, the scene, it's already imported. One more thing. Okay, yeah. So the spear is on the beach now, just walking around. Right. Let me see if I can add a skybox to it. I forgot how to do that. Add-ons. Yeah, dynamic sky. So this part is called add-on. So kind of work as an extension. It's not already usable. You need to tick it, just like what I did to make the function usable now. So I add a skybox extension. So right now I should be able to create a skybox in the scene. Okay, are there skies? I have no idea. Oh my God, oh my God. So that's not cool? Yeah, this looks better. So I can change the sky color. It's rendering on a cycle, so it will take some time to render, and now it's like this. Horizontal color, oh my God. To match the beach, does it? No, it doesn't. To match the sea, probably. Okay, so that's the scene. Done.
Nice. That looks great.
Yeah.
Sometimes I like watching on YouTube, like speed art videos using Blender, where you have these folks, sort of like what Lingyi just did, like very quickly, they make something really, really beautiful in like less than 5 minutes. Kind of fun to watch.
So do we still have time? Or should I do one more thing?
We have about 10 minutes before, or 12 minutes, I guess, before 12. So sure, if people have any additional questions, or Lingyi, if you want to do anything you want to show us.
Okay, I guess everybody's good. Let me think about it. You want me to import this too? Oh, how to add fur. That's gonna be interesting. Add fur, so right now have a beer, but we need to add a skin to it to add fur. But wait, how to add fur? What did I do? I think I add a particle system. Yeah. Yeah, this is a particle system. And here, wait, did I add it to the beer or not? Oh, I add to the sand. Okay, so the sand has all the hair. I just need to go back. Okay, beer, particle, add here. Now it's very straight here. We want it to be shorter. Particle added. Okay. So how do we cut it? It's too long, the hair. Cut. Okay. So I can't, wait a second. View, frame selected. Okay, now it's better. So right now they are just black line, but they're actually hairs. Not working. Okay. I need to. First, let me cut it. So more like beard fur. What do I do to make it hair dynamic? No, I didn't do that. Hair shape, probably not. Yeah, kind of just, yeah, I did it once before. I kind of play with those properties and they eventually come out as a good hair for the beard. But I forgot how to do it. What's in the chat? If we have some extra time, could we show us how to import this into MergeCube? I don't think we have time today. Okay.
I mean, but if you do want to show like exporting any Blender file and then bringing it into Unity or like bringing it into any other environment,
yeah. I can show Unity.
Or like a flaw.
Let me see if I can go to CodeSpaces.
Yeah, if you have access to a project, then yeah, you could just drag it in there.
Mm-hmm. But definitely Unity. Let me see. I create a new project. 3D import as so I need to get rid of particle. It doesn't work. Sorry. Now I need to export the beer, right?
It looked like
so
a porcupine for a while with all the needles.
So simply export. There is normally I choose FBX. I don't know why, but it just works well with Unity. I don't know about the CodeSpaces, but this works for Unity. So I will export it to the desktop and call it a beer. Yeah, export XBX. Oh, sorry, it does export. I should do the selected object, or it will export the entire scene. I guess it's not a problem. I can export the entire scene to the Unity. Where is my Unity? Okay, it's loading.
CodeSpaces will also handle OBJ or FBX.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, either format.
Wait, how do I use CodeSpaces? Do I join class?
Yeah, you may need to create a new project because like this is what I was saying. It might take some time for me to grant access.
You are not a pro anymore.
Yeah, just create a new project is fine.
It's grayed out.
Or you can't create any new project?
No.
All right. Sorry. Yeah, we'll have to do that maybe next time if we.
Yeah. Okay, so the Unity is open. The code space is also open. Let me do Unity first.
Sure.
So I open the file folder where I save the FBX file, which is a desktop. Where is the desktop? Right here. I need to find the beer. Where is the beer? Beer is right here. FBX works, so I just need to drag it to the assets. And it's importing, I drag it to the scene. There it is. The lighting is too strong, so need to do something. When it's importing, it's this is called a prefab in the Unity. So I need to unpack the prefab.
Yeah, because it has both the Blender lights and the Unity lights active in
Yeah,
the scene. I think.
I need to find the light and delete it. So here's the light. I need to delete it. It's still very bright. Maybe do. Is there one more light in this thing? Oh, I guess there are a lot because I imported thing. That thing has a lot of light. Point light. Delete. Okay, I guess it looks a little bit better now. Right. Where's the beer? Where is the beer? Here it is, the beer. Okay. Yeah, the beer is right here. And now we can add script to it, add property into it, and you can also still scale up, scale down in this thing. Yeah.
Nice.
Also, code spaces. What's this? I have no idea. Maybe I cannot do anything with it.
Yeah, I thought you'd be able to create a new project, but maybe not because you might be in like a student account.
Yeah, I'm in the student account.
Right.
I'm using my email, but probably not. Okay.
I was able to make new scenes.
Okay. I guess you can take over 4 minutes for you.
I didn't mean I did it right now. I've done it in the past. Recently,
Okay.
I did a code spaces thing.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
Within the Game Cloud, we have some paid accounts, as you all know. We have a limited number of CoSpaces premium accounts where we can do, Merge Cube, AR. We're paying for like 10 or so Game Salad accounts. We have a couple different course platforms like the Zenva Academy for Unity and Unreal tutorials. And there's like another platform, or awesometoots.com, with a bunch of creation courses, like videos. I can't remember what else we're paying for, but we might be paying for a few other things. But this is a great workshop. It's meant to be a starting point where you can get a small sense of what it's like to make 3D models in a couple different tools, and how we can start to make use of those 3D files in our projects. I hope folks will continue on watching additional tutorial videos that we're collecting in Padlet or on your own. There's a couple recommended YouTube channels and whatnot. And as you work on stuff, please do share your work in progress with us, and please do share links to other videos that you find helpful. And if folks have any additional ideas or suggestions or stuff that people want to see, how to create stuff, just let us know, and we're happy to share more content, I suppose, or work in progress. Anybody have any comments, questions as we wrap up for today?
I just wanted to say about CoSpaces. I just logged in. So you get, if you create an account, you get 2 free CoSpaces that you can create. However, I can't use my TC account because it remembers that I was a student in like one of the other classes, and it's like, you aren't pro anymore. Get a pro account. And I'm like, well, why can't I just have the basic account now? Like, no, you were pro. You can't go back to basic, I guess.
Oh, that's
So
why for me too.
So I use my personal account and it works fine. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
those spaces they got to monetize somehow. So
mhm.
it's relatively cheap, for teachers to pay for students. Some additional features like the MergeCube AR add-on, that's another like $2 per student or something like that. So it's not super expensive, but yeah, I guess that's their trick to require people to spend more money.
Yeah. I want to show a game that I'm making right now, like this week.
Cool.
Should I just do it right now?
Yeah, sure, definitely.
Okay, but it's loading. Yeah. Yeah, it's loading. So I kind of get a script from the GitHub that can capture your motion with your camera. It's pretty cool. So I kind of make this kind of thing in the game menu. So start from here. So I kind of make dragon roaster. I haven't added some.
Did you create this dragon?
No, I downloaded.
Okay.
Free asset, not free. I paid a little bit. So a little bit tutorial, but it's actually the game is loading. So I add a tutorial in the beginning. So I need to stand up. Yeah, I guess it can capture my hand. So it's like open mouse and close the mouse. And I'm gonna replace the cube with like food. So it kind of roasting the food to make it like a food. Yeah. So it's capturing my hand. I open the mouse with my hands.
To clarify,
literally.
You made this project, but you downloaded the GitHub, the body recognition.
Yeah.
And then you also
I downloaded the script. It's using like neural network, so I have no idea how it works.
Which is fine though. That's like black boxing. That's like that's a very common strategy in coding, is using other people's code and not really worrying about how it works, but just incorporating it into your own project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like the black box principle or abstraction.
Yeah. But it's kind of intensive. It requires a pretty good graphic card. I have a like GTX 1070. It only runs like 25 frames per second. So it's maybe hard to play it.
It was giving me flashbacks to Baby Shark.
Yeah. Okay.
Pretty cool though. Yeah.
Okay.
In the future, we can think about some mods or some educational or social impact possibilities with some of these ideas.
Yeah, this is like a prototype I made for the beginning.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. It is 12 p.m. Why don't we wrap up for today? Big round of applause. Thank you so much to Lingy and Paulo for leading us today's brown bag meeting, and hope to chat with you all more in Slack or elsewhere. So thanks everybody. Have a good rest of the week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.